Oh God.
What do you want to do? You want to put a video in as well? Just put it in front of him. Do you want to take it? Do you want to take one from the front?
Have a big queue for that one.
To be on the stage, so. Well, what it is the well, no, but it can be linked to a video, so. Yeah, no problem. Yeah.
this last night? Can you still remember it? Do you enjoy it? You want more of the same? Well, you're going to get it, so good. Okay. I know you were dying to get on with the main event. There are just a few things I have to go through for the point of housekeeping, health and safety, that sort of thing, so please bear with me. We wouldn't want to lose one of you. Honest. Videos and cameras. Flash photography can you keep to the first couple of minutes of any interview and at the end of any interview. It is really very distracting for the actors on stage when you're flashing away all the time at them, as you can imagine. Video cameras are okay so long as you don't have any trailing leads, please. And also we ask that any tapes you do make of the event that you send us a copy, please. Fire exits are clearly marked. If you hear the fire bells, use them and congregate outside. Wear your badges at all times, otherwise you might find yourself ejected. Obey the stewards. The stewards are here to make the event run smoothly and safely. If they ask you to do something, they have your own best interests at heart, please do it. And if you have any problems at all, see a steward, they will try to help you. Honest. Do not leave any personal belongings behind in the main hall when it closes. If you do, they will be removed. Any lost property will be taken to the registration desk, so if you do lose anything, that's your best bet. Go there and they'll find out if they've got it for you. Now, convention packs, your autograph arrangements. Everyone familiar with the ticket system? Anyone not familiar with the ticket system? Good. Basically, you've got your tickets. If you want extra, you have to pay for them. I believe there's a limit of 2 at a time for Tom Baker, as there will be a long queue. Photo studios, they are held just to the left-hand side of the main event here. They're all in your timetable. Special arrangement for the Tom Baker one. In your compact, it says that tickets will be available from 11 o'clock, I believe, at registrations. That is not the case. They will be available from 11 o'clock, but it will be at a different venue, which I will announce at the end of the interview itself. This is because basically we can't have too much congestion out there, so we'll find somewhere else and let you know at the end of this interview where that can be. There's a competition in the back of your compacts, a crossword. If you want to complete that, hand it in by tomorrow at lunchtime, then you stand a chance to win something. Heaven knows what, but you do. There are questionnaires at the back of them as well. If you want to fill them in, give your feedback, that's very useful for us. If you could do that, that'd be great. Hand them in at registration as well. Non-attendee compacts are available from reception. If you want a souvenir one for your friends who couldn't make it, go and see reception and they'll sell you one. Changes to the guest list. You may have, well, you already realised that we've lost Sarah Sutton due to other work commitments. Also, William Russell and Deborah Watling have landed stage roles and therefore unfortunately cannot be with us. But you'll be pleased to know that in their place we've got Peter Purvis, Michael Sheard, and none other than Tom Baker. Okay, the timetable is as it stands in the compacts at the moment. If there are any changes, I will let you know. I believe there's a large version pinned up outside somewhere if you should lose your compact anywhere. And a registration will help you at any time. Basically, enjoy this event. We're going to do our best for you. We'll do whatever we can. There's a cabaret tonight that's followed by a disco which will go on to the early hours. Enjoy it, it's a good laugh. And basically, have fun!
Actors often feel very much as if they're approaching death because they're out of work. And old actors who are approaching death feel this kind of pain doubly. So, because I've finished most of the things I've been involved in the last few months and don't expect to start again too soon, I was very excited to be asked to come here because, in a sense, all the years that I've been coming to these dues, I realized that I've been actually feasting and nourishing myself from the fans. Somebody said to me the other day, if the BBC brought back Doctor Who, would you play it again, they said. And I had to say, but I've never stopped playing it. I never went away. I never went away because kind, good, creative, imaginative fans, loyal fans, actually kept me at it. So I never did go away, you see, because fan love is quite different from ordinary love. It's really, it is. It's quite superior. And it's superior because, unlike ordinary love, fan love actually lasts. So it lasts and it's very consoling. And the thing is about this fandom, it's a two-way thing where you sustain. That's what I mean when I say I've never been away from Doctor Who. Something that enters the popular imagination never does go away, because television, film, of course, moving films, but the great television programs confer a kind of immortality. It's an amazing thing, that, because it's as if, for example, if you don't know an actor, you can look back and see the corpse of the work, and in that sense the actor is still alive, even though, of course, he may be old and grey and not very agile anymore. The other day I saw myself in an old film running upstairs, and I nearly fainted with excitement. I called my wife, and she shook her head, and it was incredible to see myself just running upstairs, I thought. And all those years ago, I used to take it for granted, you know. And now, I approach it more carefully. I go upstairs very carefully. I can't run upstairs anymore. But I try to savor it, because there may come a time when I'll never be able to go upstairs. In which case, I'll have to live in a bungalow. But the sadness of in-between work is that it's as if, because we can't live without drama, no one can live without drama, but because lots of actors are head cases, they need the drama. And I think to myself, after Randall and Hopkirk and after a few other things, I was in France last week on a little job for the BBC. But in between time, I found myself, I live in the country, I was so bored the other day with no drama in my life that I actually went to visit my own grave. I didn't actually put flowers on it, because I'm not in that bad a state. But I stood there, because I had nothing else to do. And then because I live in Kent, where for some reason there seems to be an outbreak of flies this year, the only drama at all in my part of Kent is flies. Last year it was, no, it wasn't. Sorry, no, that was the year before. And so I found myself with terrible wigs on and salt on their shoulders. They're always going like that, saying, "There's bloody dandruff everywhere." And it's a kind of inadequacy that people feel that they've somehow got to reassure you that this isn't a wig. It's really rather like a man, isn't it? When someone stabs his wooden leg, pretending he hasn't got a wooden leg. But I mean, that's the way it is where I live, in my part of Kent. Anyway, what has relieved me in the last few months is in Randall and Hopkirk principally, and also Dungeons and Dragons. I don't know if I haven't seen you since then. I did Dungeons and Dragons for a Canadian film, for, I don't know, some big American producers as well. And when I got the script, which was terrible, but they sent a first-class ticket, so I thought the script was okay. The first thing actors do is to read the ticket. If it's a first-class ticket, you think this is going to happen. But I don't, of course, read the whole of the scripts because that's absolutely pointless. So I just found my bits and read them. And because it was a Canadian film, I thought I was playing an elk. Big enough to play an elk, big enough to play a big elk. And so, because it was Canadian, I've been to Canada, and they have elks, and so when I got to Prague, which is quite interesting if you like being backstage in an opera, and so I kept waiting for about 10 days there, in great luxury, and then I turned up to shoot these 2 or 3 scenes, and when I got there was this little man who said he was the director, and he was kind of disguised to look like, not very well, to look like Steven Spielberg. And he came up to me and he said in his pitiful voice, you must forgive my accent, I can't do these sort of things, but I'll try because I'm shameless. He said, hi, I'm your director. I said, what? He said, I'm your director. And he was surrounded by all the top brass, the lighting cameraman and some of the producers. I said, you can't be. You, director? Oh, come on, he's putting me on, isn't he? Looking around. They all shook their heads. They all seemed terribly pleased behind his back that I was saying this. So I prolonged the agony a bit.
I said, how long have you been a director then? Why, he said, I've wanted to be a director all my life. I said, well, yeah, but when did you become a director? Well, he said, about 6 weeks ago. He said, there you are, you don't look like a director to me. And deliberately ignoring the fact that he looked very like Steven Spielberg, although some of it was not all that well made out. So, anyway, I said, look, before we go any further, I'd like to congratulate you on your courage. And because he was Canadian, a bit slow on the uptake, he said, how do you mean? I said, I'd like to congratulate you on your courage. I only like working for brave directors. And you're obviously brave. He said, so he tried to stand up, and he said, how do you mean I'm brave? I said, listen, you may not know it, but I suspect that you do because you're suddenly looking bright and interesting to me. Several directors I've worked for in films have died soon after working in films. And some of them in dreadful agony of inexplicable, horrific illnesses. To this little fellow, his name was Corey, I think. If he's here, he'll tell you the truth. He said, Jesus Christ. And so he ran away, and so then I went to makeup and got ready. And then when I got to the makeup and saw the makeup there, I said, what is this? And they said, well, here's your costume and your makeup. I said, this has got nothing to do with an elk. And the girl said, what do you mean, elk? I said, I'm playing an elk. It says here, elk. She said, let's have, oh Christ, she said, tell her in that office. It was a misspelling, it was elf. So suddenly I thought, hello, these Canadians have got a sense of humor. So I went to find this little director, Corey, who was just coming out of the lavatory. And I said, hey, am I playing an elf? And he said, yeah, that's right. Excuse me, and he rushed back into the lavatory. So I went outside, and he came out again. I said, an elf? Yeah. He said, yeah, an elf. I said, listen, I come from Liverpool. You may have heard of Liverpool. I said, and you know, we used to talk about elves and, you know, goblins and things like that. And I had a feeling, but I can't be sure of this. In fact, I can't be sure of anything, except that you're looking terrible. I thought that elves were little things. He said, no, not in Canada. No, not in Canada. He said, actually, he said, I didn't expect you to be quite so big. So this absolute oik hadn't actually checked, you know. Curious enough, as he was saying that, a man about 24 inches tall strolled through. And I said, is that the giant? He wasn't amused at all by this. He really wasn't amused at all. Anyway, somehow we got through 3 or 4 scenes over a couple of days, which were absolutely atrocious. It's amazing that this man had raised $30 million to do this computer game. So that was that taken out of the way. And finally I got home and I was very relieved and resolved not to go near any Canadian directors. I say that actually with a little bit of reserve because I get invited to Canada a lot, you know. Maybe not many people go to Canada willingly, but they ask me to go a lot to St. John's or Newfoundland. So they say, come and cheer us up. I get similar letters to that from Sweden as well. And now from Hungary, because they must be sending my stuff out to Hungary. And so that kind of kept me going, and I laughed about it and got home. And then, of course, I did Randall and Hopkirk. But Randall and Hopkirk, I didn't really meet anyone, because it was only me and Vic Reeves, who's called Jim Moyer. There was only him and me, really, once with the girl, Amelia. And so that was got out of the way. And then, what else? Oh yes, the other thing I must draw your attention to, because you're interested in these things, and if you're not, I'm going to tell you anyway, is that there's no doubt about it, the sword and sorcery, which has never gone away, is actually very hot and in the air at the moment. I have 2 or 3 times in the last few months been interviewed on camera for Merlin. There's actually, I didn't get one of them, that's the one that's going in Czechoslovakia now, Arthur and the Round Table, done in a sort of traditional way. The second one is the BBC are doing a 10-part series of a modern Knights of the Round Table. And they thought that I'd be nice as Merlin. this kind of terrible dropout old man, who when the nation is under terrible stress, I have the power to reconstitute and recall, through DNA, I suppose, whatever that is, to recall these people. And it seems quite interesting. It really does seem quite interesting. And that's, I'm on standby for that, so that might happen. But there's no doubt about it, it is actually everywhere now, because of Dungeons and Dragons, these 2 Arthur films going, there's something else. And I keep being sent possible ones, which I never read, and just, I bin them, and then wait for a day, and then ring up the office and say, yes, I'd be delighted to do it, knowing perfectly well that it won't happen at all, really. The only thing that I have to look forward to, for certain, all things considered, is that they're going to make Randall and Hopkirk again. They're going to do 6 or 7 more. I don't know whether they're going to be written by Charlie Higson, but at least that's one thing to look forward to. And the other thing is, of course, I'm now, I've become sort of a writer. I do like that phrase. And I've been having some letters about my children's novel, The Boy Who Kicked Pigs. The other day I received a letter from a child in Sidcup, I think. And her name is Molly Coxwell, and she said, "Dear Tom Baker, I have read your book, and it is really quite disgusting. I felt sick, but I was never bored, and I did laugh a lot, especially when he got eaten by the rats." So I was terribly touched by this. She was obviously about 9 or 10, so I wrote back and said, "Dear Molly Coxwell, thank you for your lovely letter, and you really can write a good letter." And I sent her some pictures from my past, and some badges or something like that, and bunged it off with a very elaborately packed envelope. And 2 days later, I had about 12 letters, rather childish handwriting, from obviously Molly Cox's school friends, with the identical letter. They'd, written the same letter, and only one of them had sent it. So now I ignore it now, I just keep saying, well, thanks very much for your letter, I'm glad you like The Boy Who Kicked Pigs. But it is interesting, isn't it, that my natural, some people think wonderful bad taste, is, has a kind of echo in children's minds, that they like to be disgusted. And so I'm now on with another disgusting novel called And the Scarecrows Strike Back, which is so appalling that my wife had to leave the room. When I come down from my office, I read to my wife every night, the few pages I've typed. And the other day she said, "Excuse me." I thought perhaps, it was the menopause, but it wasn't. It actually was my story. And then I heard her say to a friend on the phone, "He just won't stop reading it to me. Every night I read it." And I noticed that last night, naturally you don't give up, because one of the pleasures about being loved by someone is torturing them in return. As those of you who have got partners know, that's part of the whole thing, isn't it? So my wife, to torture me, actually eats celery. Really annoys me because she's very fit. Well, she's got tremendous jaws anyway. And so in return, I read to her every night this absolutely disgusting thing, passing as modern literature. So apart from that, we're desperately happy together. It is very strange, because when I'm with my wife, who's the most wonderful girl, very intelligent except for her choice taste in men, and she's a good deal younger than I am. Well, that's because, look, I'll give you a tip here. This is the men I'm talking to. If you want to really have a good time as the twilight threatens, get involved with an archaeologist, or, if better still, an anthropologist. Because girls who are, my wife is an anthropologist, she did anthropology at Cambridge, and the older and more raddled I get, the more fascinated she is. Yeah. She picks me over at night with a little torch. She thinks I don't notice, but I do. Because I'm still quite sentient. I may not look it, but I am. And so I go along that, but I torture her in return. And this is all part of our need to kind of create the drama in our lives, so that we can have some fun. Because without drama, without treachery, we can't live. I don't mean necessarily in our real lives, I mean in our imaginative life. I mean, when I said I wanted to write a book about a boy, what sort of a boy? I said a wicked boy, Because you can't I couldn't write a book about a good boy. I suppose in a sense the Harry Potter books are about a good boy. I'm just reading one at the moment, and he certainly seems a good boy. But he's fantastical because he's a wizard. But in a realistic boy, a good boy, people are not interested in literature, in goodness. You couldn't make a play about a happy old couple. You really couldn't. It'd be death to the ratings. No one is interested in middle-aged happiness. It's fantastic that. But middle-aged murder, mayhem, recall, adultery, treachery, burying them in the backyard under the patio, and then you can really sell a lot. I think you can anyway. So I'm tapping into this sea of absolute horror and terror, and animals, and cruel animals, not necessarily pretty animals, because we're pretty animals, people don't like pretty animals being unkind. It's a funny thing, isn't it, that people who hunt animals only want to hunt beautiful animals. It's an amazing and sad thing. If you were in a pub and someone looked at his watch and said, I've got to get off now, I've got to go and feed the cockroaches, you'd think he was a bit odd, wouldn't you? But if he said, I've got to go and feed my Burmese cats, you'd think, oh, that's nice, because they're beautiful. But the idea of feeding cockroaches is repulsive to us. Or if you said, I killed 28 cockroaches last night, people say, good on you. I can't stand cockroaches, although, of course, they're full of protein. Not everybody knows that. And if you said, last night I went out with my tennis racket under the medlar tree where the bird food is, and I killed 28 tomtits and 16 butterflies, we would be appalled, wouldn't we? We really would. And if there's anyone here who wouldn't be appalled, he can leave now. Because I think it's a dreadful thing to do. And so all these things kind of preoccupy me and make me, and I suppose make any would-be actor or performer, desire to do something else. And the nice thing I've discovered, with the perfect confidence of someone who's only ever written one novel, is that I've sold it to Japan, not for very much, but it's been sold in Japan. Apparently they really love it. They really like that, yes. And I've sold it in Spain, and I've sold it in Holland. So it's going to be all right there. And I think actually I'm going to make the next one even more horrific. It really is. I wish I'd brought it now, but I don't want you being sick all over the hall first thing. But that will come out, I hope, just next spring. I think there isn't much time to get it done this year, but I'm really thoroughly enjoying that and enjoying the power of it on this computer screen of actually creating this character called Pecksniff, which I've stolen from Dickens, Nigel Pecksniff. And he's a monster. And he's got a friend actually called Eric Blair, which is a kind of steal from George Orwell, whatever it was. But I'm enjoying making them do terrible things. And the awful thing is, no, that's not true. The wonderful thing is, when I make them do a dreadful thing, I sit there giggling, And then sometimes I pile it on because I think it's getting near time to go pour a glass of wine for my wife, and it's time to make her suffer, so that she can't drink the wine. I pour the wine out and read her a paragraph, and it puts her off her wine. And I say, do have your wine. She says, not just yet, thanks. And there it goes on. And so these kind of things preoccupy me, and I hope, will lead to things. And I'm constantly sustained outside of all those efforts, by the affection and by the interest of the fans who want to know what I'm doing, or letters from abroad from people who have just seen me. And some of the fans, of course, they're not all like you, I may have told you this before, but I don't care, I'll tell it to you again. I had a letter not long ago, if that's possible. When I was reading the Bible the other day, after I'd spotted a few flies, I was reading the book of Genesis, and it's quite good, isn't it? God created the world. First of all, he said, let there be light, and he saw the light was good, and he was pleased, and he went on. And on Thursday, he created the sun and the moon and all the stars. I thought, just a minute, where did the bleeding light come from on Monday? I didn't want to catch God out, but he really led with his chair, anyway. So this is fine, and everyone got on, and there was, then there was this, no irony at all. When Eve was actually in that garden, and somebody went, psst, and she turned around, and there's a bloody snake there, who says, hello. She didn't say, what's going on here? Or she didn't wake Adam up and say, there's a snake here talking to me. He's telling us to eat that apple. But anyway, by chapter 7, when, you know, everyone, because you, as you know, the sad thing about humanity is that the firstborn man was a murderer. Adam was not born, as you know, he was created, but the firstborn man, Cain, killed Abel. So we got off to a bad start there. And God was so pissed off by chapter 7 that he called in his friend, talk about nepotism, he called in Noah and he said, Noah, and Noah said, well, he said, listen, don't say anything to anyone. I've got good news for you, which is terrible news for the rest of them. He said, what's that, Lord? He said, I'm going to drown every one of the buggers. Except you. So, there we are. So, in fact, I don't want to actually, this is not an attempt to kind of find God guilty, but it's just an attempt to, you know, remind you he committed genocide. Not only did he do a trick with the light on the Monday, and then he made the sun on the Thursday, but he committed genocide by chapter 7. And we won't go on, it's a long list, but I do like reading it. There was someone over there who wanted to ask a question. Is it not about God again, is it?
How did you get on the Narnia video? The Narnia video?
How did I get on?
How did you enjoy being on the Narnia video?
Well, that's a nice question. Did I enjoy being in the Narnia one? Well, I can enjoy anything really, you know. Yes, I can enjoy anything, and I quite enjoyed it. But the thing is, you see, one of the secrets of enjoying things in television, and certainly, of course, you can't help it in the theatre, is that I never have ever watched anything I've been in. Because I always said to myself, you know, well, of course I've had to watch some sort of things when I've had to revoice something, or they've asked my opinion about a scene later. But I've never been powerful enough to say, let's reshoot that scene, which is what actors like to be able to say. Big, powerful actors can say, we'll shoot the scene again. Otherwise, if I go to see the Rushes, and I don't like what they say, all it does is wear me out. You know, I think we could have done it better. And so my answer to that was never to watch anything. And certainly, in Narnia, I found the characterization of the children grotesque. Those funny children who talk. But I don't know what goes on in children's minds because modern children love those characters. And yet, C.S. Lewis, who would be more than 100 years old now, more, about 120 or 30, he was writing about Edwardian children. And it's heavily moral, isn't it? But maybe children like those moral stories. But I like doing it because it's nice being with the actors and everything. And also, when you do children's classics, they get repeated, so you get paid 2 or 3 times. That means that I can take my wife out to a smart restaurant and then refuse to speak to her, you know, which gives me a lot of pleasure. She keeps saying, what's the matter with you? Things like that, I like doing that. Any more questions? This man here?
Yeah. Does Sky pay well for voiceovers for boxing promos?
The boxing programme, it only took me about an hour. Yes, I think I got £320 to talk about boxing, about which I know not much. But, and I was doing this funny growly voice, about Lennox Lewis. Or that sort of stuff. But I mean, if that's what people want, I was doing one for Mitsubishi, I think, on Friday. And it really was absolute nonsensical stuff, you know. But, you know, it's no point in saying this is nonsensical, I'm not going to do it. It's amazing when someone says £320, how nonsense becomes really quite attractive. It's amazing that. You say, oh, that's how interesting. Yes, I think it's really subtle. You think, what am I saying this for? But there's no limit to hypocrisy. But of course, actors have to be we all have to be hypocrites, otherwise there will be no social cohesion in our lives. But actors particularly are professional hypocrites. I mean, actors are fakers. That's the extraordinary thing, isn't it? That actors are supposed to be convincing when in fact they're faking an emotion, which actually is done so well sometimes that it engages whole millions of people in their imagination and they believe it. Yes? Go on there at the back. Shout it out. Will someone, do you want to repeat that for me? Just shout. What did he say? What's the hardest job?
What's the worst part you've had to play as an actor since you started?
The worst part?
Yeah.
Oh, I think Macbeth. I got far too many laughs in Macbeth. It was absolutely apparent, and especially at the end when he realised that the witches had done him in. The bloody place was in convulsions. And people, you know, serious people were appalled. Because I don't quite understand, because I'm not at all clever. That's why I talk so confidently about everything. I know nothing about anything. But I mean, I don't quite understand, this kind of, I can't quite grasp this kind of tragic figure. He strikes me as being not only a prat, but a murderous prat. And why, don't try and tell me why it is that he's a heroic figure, or a tragic figure. From the word go, he's absolutely appalling. And so I was always having arguments about people like that. And so I got lots of laughs, and so therefore I was a failure. But the audiences, the young audiences who came, did like it, but it infuriated everyone else. So that was a failure, yeah. It was so bad, because the audience also were booing. They booed me on the first night. And I became sick then, and I was throwing up all over the place. And I suddenly felt that I was going to die. Lots of us have this feeling, but I had it rather acutely that time, and I'd signed for 58 performances. And so the next day when I came in for the matinee, I brought in some rather precious books that I had, and I gave them away to some of the younger actors, thinking I'm going to be dead, so they might as well have them. There's no one else I wanted to do. So every day I came in for a performance, I brought more and more of my possessions away, as this feeling I was going to die grew, in spite of all the laughter and booing. And by the end of the 58 days, I had nothing left except a chaise longue. And that was on the Saturday afternoon. And then on the Saturday night, the 58th performance came, and they booed and laughed again, and the whole bloody ordeal was over, and I realized I wasn't going to die. And I had nothing left. I had to sleep on somebody's floor that night. And it wasn't long after that, sleeping on someone's floor, that it led to Doctor Who. It's a rather convoluted story. So, yes, Macbeth was amazing. Yes?
If you hadn't chosen to become an actor, what would your career role have been?
Yeah, the girl asked an interesting question. If I hadn't become an actor, what would I have become? I don't think, actually, I could have been anything else, really, because I had this, being brought up in this kind of tumultuous religious life, full of bigotry and brought up. It's an amazing thing, isn't it? Christianity is very beautiful, very difficult, because the hardest injunction is that we love one another. This is very difficult. It's not difficult with fans, actually, but it's difficult with people in their ordinary lives, because we get tired of loving people. Sometimes our love dies. Sometimes their love dies for us. So I was brought up in all this, hating the Jews, because of course they killed Christ. We knew all the quotes, hating the Protestants, crossing the street, keeping your head down. So I was brought up, in other words, this preposterous thing. Instead of being brought up to love one another, we were brought up to hate one another. All the bigotry, which was reinforced and is expressed all over the world now. So my way in this thing was to be in the church, sniffing incense, which used to make my legs go weak, still does. I was a sniffer from a very early age. The smell of linoleum, going to funerals, that used to please me a lot. Because children used to die of diseases then that you've never even heard of. And we knew words like tracheotomy, which meant cutting the throat of children so to save their lives. We knew words like diphtheria. So it was terribly dramatic, you see. And in this drama, I was playing quite a significant part in this tiny little parish I lived in. So there was nothing else for it. I was just a performer from the word go, just because of the circumstances. It wasn't really a conscious thing. Later on I said, I think I'll become an actor. I always was. The only thing is, I didn't know at an early age how to turn it into there was no one to tell me what to do with this kind of tiny little gift I have of making people laugh, sometimes making them cry, and frequently making them cringe. But, yes?
Did you enjoy doing the car adverts with Don Pertwee? If you did,
He says, did I enjoy doing the car advert? Yes, I did enjoy doing the car advert, because it only took about an hour and a half, and we were paid a shed full of money. Yeah, it was a double, yeah. And I said to John was very funny and more political and clever than I am. He said, now look dear, we don't want any trouble. Just let's do this and get off. So we did. And Peter will tell you, he was in it. Peter comes tomorrow, he was in it. Yes, it was a doddle. Yeah, those are easy jobs. Yeah. And the other week I was in France for 2 days. I've been learning French, and so they sent me to France to Aix-en-Provence, which is very beautiful, and I had to try my French out. What a waste of 4 bloody years. Absolute waste. I'm going to give it up. Yes?
who's your favourite drinking partner?
My favourite drinking partner, so I will suggest that I've become some kind of full staff or something. My favourite drinking partner is whoever I'm with at the time who's listening to me. Like every other drinking partner. Like, yes, go on.
Would you like to write something
Would I like to write something for what? Well, I might if they ask me nicely enough. If people ask me nicely, I'm very vulnerable, you know. I'm very vulnerable to, you know, affection and respect and being caressed. Yes. So maybe they'll do that. Maybe they'll send me a caresser. Yeah, the man on the wall.
You mentioned that this is your live programme. It's a great programme as well. What was it like for you being on the programme?
Well, being in This Is Your Life, I just knew when they caught me, two things went through my mind. I was just handing someone a copy of my book. I was set up in a bookshop, quite near the studios. That was very thrifty of Thames, wasn't it? So my wife and the publisher and everyone set me up near Thames Television, who were making for the BBC, as you know. And so a Dalek came in, and I think there must have been a camera on me, as if I'm going to be impressed by a Dalek. You know, I mean, I'm seeing Daleks all the time. I was talking on a radio program. I think it was heard out this morning. There's a girl in Coventry who lives with two Daleks, one on either side of the fire, and she sits there with these two Daleks. I think her name is Judith, and she had a hell of a good time. So I mean, I wasn't surprised when a Dalek came up. But when Michael Aspel said, "This is your life," the first thing that went through my mind. Then I saw the camera, and then I realised I was holding a copy of The Boy Who Kicked Pigs. And the first thing, well, it wasn't, you know, in a sequence like that. One can think of lots of things at the same time. I thought, 9 million people watch this show, and maybe that book is in camera. And then I thought, well, and my wife will like it too, you know, because I'm not on the scene with my wife. Sometimes I say,